Guys, I have been to the treasure trove. I found the golden eggs. These are 100 90s movies that I'm going to review in one motherfucking video. The 90s is my favorite decade. What's yours? But what I'm going to do... Oh, look, Hollywood Video. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give a different rating system per decade. So it's going to be something based on the decade, the time period, right? The era, if you will. For the 90s, I'm going to give it, because movies are out of 1 to 5 star ratings. So I'm going to give these out of Beanie Babies. Out of 1 through 5, a Beanie Baby rating. All right? Heat. Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Val Kilmer. This is a great movie. It's just like the typical kind of movie you've seen before where they blend the criminals with the police together, like the lines are blurred and it's gray. Who's really right in the end? And I like that they showed that Pacino and Robert De Niro's character are pretty much the same character, but on the opposite sides of the coin. My one complaint about the film, even though it's excellent, it'd be funny if they had a sequel and they called it Cold. All right, anyway. Val Kilmer, I love Val Kilmer. I think he's underrated because in this film, he's super underutilized, in my opinion. He's like barely used in it, and it pisses me off. They don't give him that much dialogue in the film, which is bullshit. To me, he's just as big of a star as Pacino and De Niro. I don't care if they're older or whatever. People think they're more experienced actors. Val Kilmer was a great actor. He deserved more screen time in this film. For Heat, I will give it 3.5 Beanie Babies. This is a film that's hard to watch now because of Kevin Spacey. But I always thought that this was a really good movie. I liked the mystery behind it, and it had some humor in it. It was fun. I love this cover. It's like it's a cover you could use for any decade, but for some strange reason, doesn't it seem like such a 90s looking cover? Maybe it's the color or something. And the whole plot of the film is that you're trying to figure out who the murderer is of all the killings. Who's the one out of these 5 guys? And I'm not going to say who it is, okay? But yeah, it's a good movie. And it's got some famous quotes from it as well. 3 Beanie Babies. Yeah, A Night at the Roxbury. Man, this is a really, really funny movie. Look how cool this is. Remember my other videos in the 90s? I talked about like the sparkling trading cards and other stuff that they had sparkles on it. Very a 90s trend. This movie, A Night at the Roxbury, is based off of those Saturday Night Live skits. And it usually had these 2 guys in it, and they were rocking out to that song. That 90s song, and they were really funny, and they were always trying to pick up chicks. The song What Is Love? Back in the 90s, they started making movies out of SNL skits, and some of them worked, some of them scored, and some of them didn't, and this one did. I think this is Will Ferrell's first movie, and I really like it. It's good. The boys are funny in it. And they basically fleshed out a story for these 2 characters based off of that little skit where all they did was drove around at night and go to bars and try to pick up chicks. And Jim Carrey was in some of the skits they had on SNL, but he's not in this movie, Jim Carrey. A Night at the Roxbury, I definitely give it 3 Beanie Babies out of 5. The Mummy, Brendan Fraser. I love Brendan Fraser. This is one of Brendan Fraser's masterpieces. I also love The Mummy Returns, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about The Mummy. This was basically Universal, like, taking the Mummy concept from the old black and white films and now, like, updating it for, like, the 90s. I think this was 1999. This is such a great movie. It's an adventure film, so it's so much like Indiana Jones. And it's one of Brendan Fraser's best, and I just think the Mummy movie series is like one of the best movie series of all time, and people always still talk about how great it is, and I think they made 4 of them at this point. But they're not really talked about anymore. It's too bad, because it was just really cool back in the day that they did such a creative idea with the mummy as a concept. And in many ways, you could say these mummy movies, the Brendan Fraser mummy movies, are better than the older Universal ones. So yeah, I give the Mummy 4 Beanie Babies out of 5. That's right. Natural Born Killers. Yes, Woody Harrelson. And Rodney Dangerfield actually appears in this movie. A very brief scene where he plays like kind of this like sleazy guy with the chicks. Kind of a stupid role for him to play, but it's a gritty 90s movie. Like gritty things and like anger and all that stuff. There was a very hip like trend in the 90s for entertainment. And it is entertaining, this movie. Definitely. And people raved about it at the time, but after it came out, no one said a damn thing about it afterwards, which is weird. Well, I haven't seen it in a long time, but back in the day when I saw it, I really liked it. So I'm going to give it 3 Beanie Babies out of 5. Yes, Born on the 4th of July, Tom Cruise. Man, this is a great movie, and I think it's a very educational movie, and it shows like the horror of war, and it shows the power and deception of propaganda in this country, in the United States. And I love that this film shows people that you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to understand the trickery of the government. And so this movie is great. It is kind of like, reminds me of Forrest Gump, but only darker and more serious. Like there's no jokes in this film. So it's a great movie. I give it 4 Beanie Babies out of 5. Yeah, Dick Tracy. They made a big deal in the marketing department when this film came out, and I think it's an excellent, excellent movie. I think it's an underrated 90s movie. It was supposed to be this huge hit, and it was a hit, but people forgot about it pretty quickly after it came out for some fucking reason. Yeah, what can I say? I think Warren Beatty is great. I think he might be one of my favorite actors. Madonna's in it, and she's good. Oh, Al Pacino plays one of the mobsters, and what's amazing is that the characters look just like, their silly faces look like those silly characters from the Dick Tracy comics, which is perfect. I mean, they're kind of like Batman villains, only all the weird things about them are in their faces. Yeah, it's definitely a classic, and Dick Tracy is badass in it. I mean, this entire movie is like 100% better than all of the Dick Tracy comics and shit. It's like this right here is the best version of Dick Tracy. So I give Dick Tracy, I give it 4.5 Beanie Babies out of 5. Mars Attacks. Nice Planet. We'll take it. This is a classic movie. And it has a lot of like celebrity guest stars in it, and I love the 90s CGI with the aliens, and they're taking over the world, and Jack Nicholson's in it. I think he plays the president, and the humor is weird. It's basically like a parody of the 50s monster alien movies, but in like the 90s. So it's like a 90s spin on it. Oh, and Pierce Brosnan and James Bond is in it too. Danny DeVito has a very, very short role in the film, even though he's short. Get it? Okay, anyway. I love the expressions on the eyes of the aliens. It feels like a Warner Brothers cartoon, which is pretty cool because it's a Warner Brothers movie. So it feels very Looney Toony, even though it's live action. And so it's actually kind of like Space Jam, where the aliens take over the world. It's basically trying to borderline be an adult film with childlike elements to it, which is something that the 90s did so fucking well back in the day, and it's a lost art these days. Like, usually these days, if there's a kid's movie, it doesn't have adult things in it. So adults and kids liking the same things these days are not the same. And I miss that back in the 90s, we used to have a culture that was like that, where they didn't treat all the kids like they were dumb shits, and they didn't treat all the adults like, oh, only adults are allowed to like serious shit. It's like, no. Adults can like cartoony shit too. Not that it's shit, but you know what I'm saying. And it just pisses me off that we live in a society now, and a culture now, that both of those things are so fucking separated. It's fucking frog shit. That's right, I made a new curse. Frog shit. All right, Mars Attacks, 3 Beanie Babies. Kingpin. This movie is hilarious. Woody Harrelson, Randy Quaid, Vanessa, I forget her last name. And in the 90s, the two like big bowling movies were Kingpin and The Big Lebowski. Woody Harrelson proves once again that he's one of the greatest actors of all time. He's so entertaining as an actor in everything he's in, and he actually usually plays the same role in every movie. We see that a lot in Hollywood, but anyway. Bill Murray plays the villain in the film, and at the end they bowl against him. And what's really cool, at least from what I remember, his bowling ball is like clear and has a rose in it, which I thought was really cool. And he basically plays a pompous ass in the film, Bill Murray. Kingpin, very funny, kind of underrated. You don't hear people talking about Kingpin. I mean, really, it's pretty underrated. It's one of the classic comedies, not just of the 90s, but of all time. I give it 3 Beanie Babies out of 5. Yes, Ed Wood, Johnny Depp is such a great actor. And what I have to say about Mr. Depp is that half of his movies suck and half of them are great. I think he's a Illuminati slime ball, but we're talking about the actor and his work and not the man himself. But anyway, that's an entirely different video. This movie is excellent. It's one of the best movies of the 90s, and it's an ultimate tribute to the 1950s sci-fi horror boom that was going on. And Ed Wood was this crazy director that was cheap as fuck when he made his movies, and it showed on screen, and his movies became unintentionally hilarious. And one of the biggest things Ed Wood tried to be a star was getting Bela Lugosi, yes, the man who played Dracula, and he was so old at the time, and he got convinced Bela to be in his films. And the actor that plays Bela Lugosi in the film, he looks and talks so much like Bela Lugosi that you'd be convinced that he really is Bela Lugosi. Bill Murray's in it. Yeah, this film is excellent. I highly recommend it for any like movie buff out there. And it's just a fun time because it shows him making all the movies with them. It's amazing just how true the story is and how it doesn't matter what your budget is. As long as you have imagination and a dream, and if you have the determination, you can do whatever the hell you want in this world and fuck the system. I give Ed Wood 4 Beanie Babies out of 5. You can't talk about the 90s without mentioning the great big green beast, Godzilla. Godzilla has been around since the 1950s. However, in the 90s, there was this big Godzilla resurgence, and that was fucking awesome, man. There was so many Godzilla movies in the 90s, and they had the toys and the video games and whatever. Anyway, today we're going to talk about Godzilla versus Space Godzilla. It almost kind of feels like the last Godzilla movie, like the way they kind of build up the title and everything. Space Godzilla is so fucking cool. He's got like giant ice picks on both sides of his shoulders. He can like fly, and it just rules, man. The special effects of the 90s just are kick ass. And by the way, I printed out this cover to make it in full because you can't get the DVD of Godzilla versus Space Godzilla that looks like this. This is a custom, baby. What do I give Godzilla versus Space Godzilla? Well, it's Space Godzilla. He rules. The movie is very good. And it also brings back Godzilla's son. So I'll give Godzilla versus Space Godzilla, I'll give it 3.5 Beanie Babies out of 5. Why not? And it also has a double feature. Godzilla versus Destroyer. Now, this was marketed at the time as the final Godzilla film, and spoilers, Godzilla actually dies at the end of the film, and his heart is has radiation in it. They built up Destroyer to be like the most powerful monster Godzilla's ever fought. So they made it seem like it was the finale to the entire series, and it was for a while. They didn't make a Godzilla film after this movie for quite a while, so the build-up for this movie was insane in Japan. However, in the United States, we never got this kind of hype. But, I mean, they did release it on VHS in the 90s eventually. Once again, this is printed. I made this look like this because this is really a double feature, but I printed the full cover on both sides because I'm awesome. Godzilla vs. Destroya is a little better than Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, and I love Destroya, and I loved playing as him in Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee back in the 2000s. Remember that game, boys? Anyway, so since it's a little better, it has moments where it's way too slow, and there's too much shit with the humans, but when it comes to the fighting, I definitely have to give it to this film. I will give it 3.5 Beanie Babies out of 5. The Saint. Now, once again, we got the great Val Kilmer in probably his greatest movie. And no one talks about this film, and I don't even know if it was a hit. I was a little too young to know. But this movie is excellent. He basically puts on all these disguises and really tricks people into thinking he's a different person. And this movie is based off of the old Roger Moore TV show where he played the Saint, and that was before Roger Moore became 007. This movie, once again, the acting is excellent from Val Kilmer, and it's got some corny things in it, especially at the end. It's kind of way too far-fetched. Like, at the ending is way too far-fetched. But I'm just kind of amazed how people do not talk about this film, like, at all. This is probably one of the most underrated films of the 90s. Definitely, for sure. I give The Saint a solid 4 Beanie Babies out of 5. Yes, Nicolas Cage in one of his best movies, probably. Snake Eyes is basically a mystery thriller of who killed someone, and it has so many twists and turns. It feels like you're on a roller coaster. You really would never see who the person is, who's the murderer coming. They make it so fucking difficult for you to figure that out. There are things in the movie that are kind of stupid, that are pretty far-fetched, that are pretty stupid, like the whole thing with the boxer. Everything about the whole thing with the boxer segment, you wouldn't believe any of that shit. I mean, we know that there are boxing matches that are fixed. Like back in the day, in the 90s, Mike Tyson, he had a lot of fixed boxing matches. I also notice about this film that it tries to film the whole movie in one shot, which is interesting, but it gets a little tiresome. But I like the creativity of the film, and it has Lieutenant Dan in it, and we all us people of the world know who I mean when I say Lieutenant Dan. Lieutenant Dan. The film has a little bit of annoying characters in it, and a lot of the characters aren't likable, but the story's likable enough for you to keep watching it, because you do kind of want to see what happens. And the film grows on you, in my opinion, as it goes on, because in my opinion, it starts off real shitty. But I give this film, Snake Eyes, I give it 3 out of 5. Black Circle Boys. Oh my God, let me tell you guys, this is the darkest film I've ever seen. Now, I'm a born-again Christian, right? I haven't talked about that quite a bit on this channel, but I do have a dark side to me, and I enjoy the dark side I have, and that's why I indulged in watching this film. But look, I can basically talk about this film for another hour because it's fascinating. I just gotta say, this is extremely dark and extremely satanic, and it's based on a true story. And there's a lot of bad luck from the actors after this film was released. It's like, yeah, well, you play with the devil, what do you think happens? Anyway, I think this is an interesting movie, and I'm not even sure why it was made. I wonder if people who are Satanists made it, or people who just find Satanism fascinating, such as myself, but don't worship the devil. I worship God and Jesus. Like, this film is very, very disturbing. It is actually as evil as the cover is. So what do I give the Black Circle Boys? Oy vey. I don't even know why they even marketed this film. This is just this very bizarre film. God. One of the biggest compliments you can give a film is that it makes you feel. And wow, did this film make me feel. I have no choice but to give it 4 Beanie Babies. Mission Impossible 1, Tom Cruise trying to be like James Bond. I loved the Mission Impossible trilogy, and I haven't seen all the new ones, but they're pretty cool, actually. This first film has so many twists and turns. I love the mystery and intrigue in the film. I actually like the second Mission Impossible better than the first, and the third is decent. The first one is very impressive. A lot of people weren't even aware that there was a Mission Impossible TV show before the movies with Tom Cruise ever even happened. So what do I give it? I'll give it three Beanie Babies out of 5. Detroit Rock City. This is a movie that was made in the 90s, and it was during the big Kiss reunion where Ace Frehley and Peter Criss returned to the band. And this is when Kissteria happened again in the 90s. This is an excellent movie. It's funny, it's fun, and any Kiss fan should watch this film. I highly recommend it. It's so nostalgic for the 70s. It basically takes place in the 70s. And it's like these boys and their crazy journey to meet Kiss in concert. I don't like that this film is very anti-Christian. It pisses me off when I'm watching it, and that really does bother me. And it's like I thought the acronym for KISS, Knights in Satan's Service, I thought that was not true. However, this film has an agenda, and I don't like it. But other than those moments, I think it's a great film, and unlike other people, I'm able to look past those things and enjoy the rest of the movie. I do appreciate what they were going for when it came to the Christian stuff, but they went way too far. So what do I give it? Well, I'll give it 4 Beanie Babies out of 5. It is underrated. New Jack City. This is so badass. Wesley Snipes is one of my favorite actors. And my all-time favorite actor is Sylvester Stallone. Ice-T's in this film, and he plays a cop, and it's like before he was a cop on those terrible TV shows. This is like it feels like The Godfather. I love this film. Everyone who was in the 90s saw this film when it came out. It's so big. Am I my brother's keeper? All that cool shit. And I love his line that Wesley says in the film where he's like, you gotta rob to get rich in the Reagan era. Highly recommend New Jack City. I'll give it 3.5 Beanie Babies out of 5. Yes, Vampire in Brooklyn, starring Eddie Murphy. This film bombed at the box office for some reason. I really enjoyed this film. I think a lot of Eddie fans enjoy it too. It's not as funny as The Nutty Professor or some of his other films, but it's really cool, and it's got that cool vampire 90s vibe to it, baby. And it's got some clever jokes in it. I don't know, I just think it's very clever in the way it shows the separation of vampires to humans. And he plays like a serious villain in it with some comedic elements. And so it's not Eddie like going like bananas in the film like he usually does in all his movies. Vampire in Brooklyn. I wouldn't say it's underrated, but I do think it's overlooked, and I think it got a bad rap, and I think that's stupid. Vampire in Brooklyn is a classic. It's a good movie, and I give it 3 Beanie Babies out of 5. Jackie Chan's First Strike. I love Jackie Chan. I grew up with the man, and he is the man. Let me tell you, his kung fu, and the boys made like 1 million movies. What's really cool about this film is that this is around the time where Jackie Chan was becoming a star in like the mid 90s. What's fascinating about this film to me is that his name is in the title of the movie, the actor. When do you ever see that? It's just such an awesome cover, and I love the Americanized version of this film. I actually like those cultural things they change in TV shows and movies. A lot of people find them with disdain. The internet despises those things, like the changes they make in anime. I actually like those changes, and because it fits more with America or the West, and I like that stuff. I think it's nostalgic. Some of those changes are better than the originals, but everyone always thinks, oh, because it's just the original, it's better. It's like, fuck you, you know? This is a really good movie. He is extremely impressive. He fights with these ladders in the film. Funny story, I was watching this outside with my projector in freezing cold winter weather, and I was freezing my balls off, and Jackie Chan is a reoccurring joke in the film where he doesn't have a jacket, and he's freezing throughout half the movie. So I was just like Jackie Chan. So what do I give Jackie Chan's First Strike? 2.5 Beanie Babies out of 5. It could have been better, but it is a classic. Sudden Death. Rob Van Dam. Well, not Rob Van Dam. That's WWF. Van Damme, Sudden Death. This is an interesting movie. It's like this terrorist is trying to threaten the people during a hockey game. It's really good. I think it's one of Van Damme's best movies, and he has a fight with this guy in a costume in the kitchen, and it's hilarious. Check it out on YouTube, man. There are things in the film that are a little too predictable, and the villains are actually a little too dark. I felt a little too uncomfortable with the villains in the film. They acted way too sinister, and, you know, with, like, the people, and it's like, come on. You don't have to go that far. This isn't the Black Circle Boys. Sudden Death was supposed to be this huge hit for Van Damme, and it wasn't. And that's a damn shame. Get it? A damn shame? Okay, that's not funny. Clever, but not funny. Sudden Death is a classic. I'll give it 3.5 Beanie Babies out of 5. Marked for Death. I love Steven Seagal. I don't care what anyone says. I actually like him better than Van Damme. I think he's super cool, and yeah, I do. I'm sorry, I do. I know he's become a joke, and he's, like, unintentionally hilarious, and it's true. I laugh at the humor from people that make fun of Steven Seagal, but I still love his movies. He does act way too serious in them, and it is funny, but I still think he's a cool karate guy, and I do love his old 90s, and his 90s movies were the best. And this is one of his greatest films, and that's why I put it in here. Marked for Death, I love. It's Seagal at his best. What can I tell you? I'll give it 3.5 Beanie Babies out of 5. Van Damme, The Quest. Huge fans of Bloodsport really definitely wanted Van Damme to make a sequel starring him in Bloodsport movies. And another actor played Van Damme's role in the other Bloodsport movies. And he was great, and the Bloodsport sequels I like. I think they're good movies. I don't care what anyone fucking says. But if you watch The Quest, which was actually Van Damme's directorial debut, it's supposed to be very similar to Bloodsport. And I think the guy that Bloodsport is based off of sued Van Damme. But anyway, that's a long story. What do I think about The Quest? I think it rules. I think it's underrated. And I think it should have got more attention when it came out. It should have had better marketing, and I think people would have gotten more attention, and it could have became a big hit. I blame the marketing department. Roger Moore's in the film, which is awesome. There's so much I can say about The Quest, but we got to keep going. So what do I give The Quest? 4 Beanie Babies. Cliffhanger. Like I mentioned earlier, Stallone is my favorite actor. This is basically a macho film taking on the mountains, and there's so many action movie possibilities when you film with the mountains and everything. It has moments in the film where people fall off of these wires, and it's fucking terrifying. John Lithgow, who everyone knows from Third Rock from the Sun, is in this film, and he plays the villain, and he is vicious. He is so goddamn brutal in the film. He's like fucking evil, man. And he's also hilarious in this film, unintentionally as the villain. His dialogue is so funny. There's so many cool parts in this film. I really like Cliffhanger. I really like it. It was a hit at the time, so I guess it's not underrated. But I guess it's a little underrated. I wish there was Cliffhanger 2, 3, and 4, and 5, and Cliffhanger 10. 3.5 Beanie Babies. Rising Sun. Man, if you haven't seen this film, if you're a movie buff, I highly recommend it. Sean Connery and Wesley Snipes together in one film. It's basically a crime drama mystery. So it's basically a buddy cop movie, but it's a really good one. It's slow paced and it has a buildup of a lot of mystery. And there's some action in it, and the humor I enjoy. It's just so awesome to see them together. It's not talked about at all. I don't understand, like, there's all these 90s movies that are excellent, and people do not talk about them. People don't even know they exist, and this is a great movie. Rising Sun, give it 4 Beanie Babies. True Lies. All right, I don't care what anyone says. You can give me hate comments, but I think Schwarzenegger is I think he's an overrated movie star. I like him in some movies, like a few. I think a lot of his movies aren't that good, and he's very overrated in my opinion. I mean, he's decent, and I think I put this in here because I think True Lies is probably his greatest film. There's so many awesome parts in this film. Tom Arnold's in it. This very memorable actress is in it, and I don't remember her name, but you guys will know her if you watch it. I would recommend True Lies. If you want to watch any Arnold film and you haven't, check this one out. I'll give it 3.5 Beanie Babies. Next we have Van Damme, Hard Target. I think this film is underrated. I think it's his best film other than Bloodsport. I think this film is excellent in terms of an action movie. It's very unique. There's so much action in it. Walter Brimley's in it, which is hilarious. I never thought I'd see that old guy in a movie. He didn't talk about diabetes, but he kind of acted like he did in those commercials, and it was pretty hilarious that he's in it because it just makes you laugh. I love the action in this film. Van Damme has so many cool moments in this movie. It's underrated. This is like an underrated movie in general. People do not talk about it. Hard Target, man. Rules. One of the best movies ever made. I give it 4.5 Beanie Babies. Rocket Man. This film I'm really nostalgic for some reason. I used to watch it on TV back in the 2000s. It's a decent movie and it's not that funny, but to me it's just memorable because there's a scene where they sing, he's got the whole world in his hands. They sing it in the film and like the whole world literally sings the song because he's up like in space. And some people hate this film, and I know it's fucking stupid, but whatever. I'm nostalgic towards it, and it's a decent movie. It's not great. There are jokes that don't land, and it was a bomb, but whatever. I think this guy is an entertaining actor. I don't know how funny I think he is, though. I think he's just okay in terms of comedy. I'm funnier than this guy. I think he's a decent actor, and it's a decent film, so I'm going to give Rocket Man, it's rough, but I'm going to give it 2 Beanie Babies. Battlefield Earth with John Travolta. This film tanked hard at the box office, and it's notorious for being one of the best bad movies of all time. I was watching it, and I forgot about that, and as I was watching it, I couldn't believe that. I was pretty entertained by this film. I didn't think it was that bad. I thought it was a pretty good movie. I mean, not everything about it is hilarious, and I kind of like John Travolta's character in the film. I think he's entertaining as a villain. I don't think this film is as bad as people say it is, so I think it's a little underrated. It's a cool movie, and it does kind of feel like Chicken Run or those other movies where it's like the humans are slaves and they got to fight back and all that. It's Travolta's dive into sci-fi, and it's pretty cool, actually. And he has a hilarious line which has been mentioned quite a bit in videos where he's like, when you were still learning how to spell your name. All right, anyway, what do I give Battlefield Earth? Well, I give it 3 Beanie Babies. Fuck all you guys. Falling Down, Michael Douglas. I absolutely adore this film. Talks about this guy who's this regular guy, works 9 to 5, and it's his day off or something, and everything bothers him. It's a tale about society, and I like that the film basically doesn't tell you who's right and who's wrong. You'll notice that as a trend throughout the film. Is Michael Douglas, is his character an a-hole, or is he correct in the stuff he says to all the characters in the film? A lot of the bad things that happen to him in the film are the result of lazy Americans, incompetent people, and he has to deal with all of it. And the way he handles it, he loses his mind and he starts acting really rash. I think he was just a nice guy that had a really fucking bad day. I can't recommend this film enough. I do feel bad for his character. There's a lot of people that watch this and they're like, yeah, he sucks as a character. He's a piece of shit. No, he's not. He's not. I identify with his character being pissed off. Anyone who gets really pissed off or has anger issues, check out Falling Down. And it's excellent, man. Highly recommended. It's one of the best films ever. What About Bob? I love this film. I love this. This is one of my favorite movies. 5 Beanie Babies. This is an underrated classic. And I did hear a story that I hate, that Richard Dreyfuss and Bill Murray hated each other filming this film, which really sucks, man. And I hate that that's true, but it actually, you can see it on screen, which is good for the film, but bad for their relationship. No wonder there was no What About Bob 2. I don't think the marketing was there for this, and I think that's why it didn't take off like a rocket. But I think it's one of the funniest movies of all time. And he gets a book in the film called Baby Steps, Bill Murray. And I know it's a comedy, guys, but think about that when you're trying to solve something in your life that's stressing you the fuck out. Just remember, baby steps. Baby steps. It'll help you in your life, and you improve your life a little bit every day. Just a tiny bit every day. Baby steps. And Richard Dreyfuss is one of my favorite actors. For some reason, there's a lot of people that hate him. And are you guys kidding? Richard Dreyfuss is like amazing. All right. I gave this film enough praise, right? 5 Beanie Babies. Another Van Damme movie. I know. I should have more variety, but fuck it. I love Van Damme. This is Lionheart. And I love that this film is not predictable. There's lots of really unpredictable things in it, for the most part. Really, really good movie. Lionheart is great. Man, it's a classic. I love the fight at the end. It has an interesting story that I think involves the mob and like people that just care, like greedy business people. Yeah, I wish there was Lionheart 2 and whatever. So what do I give it? Well, I'll give it 3.5 Beanie Babies. I love Leslie Nielsen. He's one of my favorite comedians. He is a little underrated, actually. The man was hysterical. And if you love the Naked Gun movies like me, he actually had all these other comedy movies in the 90s that went underlooked, and they're just as funny as the Naked Gun. And this is one of them, Spy Hard, which is a terrible title. And yeah, it's a parody of James Bond, but who cares? It's awesome. I mean, I don't care. It's a parody of Bond. I know you think it's a little tired, but it's so great. I love this movie. I'm going to give it 4 Beanie Babies. Bram Stoker's Dracula. This was hailed at the time as supposedly the most faithful adaptation of the Dracula novel to a film. I think it really shows. Watching it looks like a MTV music video. There's lots of color, lots of really great shots and dramatic elements to the film theatrically. This is one of the best Dracula movies, and with good reason. It was Dracula's big comeback, the Dracula for the 90s. It's long. It's a slow movie, but it's damn entertaining, so I give it 4 Beanie Babies. Perfect to put this next. Dracula Dead and Loving It. So I love Mel Brooks, right? He's one of the funniest guys to make movies, and he always made fun of all these things in movies. He made fun of Westerns, and then he made fun of Star Wars with Spaceballs, which is his best movie. Yeah, come on, guys, it really is. Spaceballs is amazing. And then Mel made fun of Frankenstein with Young Frankenstein, and then he made fun of Dracula. Dracula was next. This film flopped, and I don't think it deserved that. It's a pretty good movie, and it's not great like the other movies he did, but it is pretty good. It's good, and it has some jokes that land and some that don't. And Leslie Nielsen, come on, as Dracula, and it has a hilarious ending, by the way. So what do I give it? I'll give it 3 Beanie Babies. Demolition Man. I haven't seen this film in years. I think I only watched it twice or some shit, but it's so badass to include it in this list, and 2 of my favorite actors of all time. It's a great movie, and it's so cool to pin them together and see how they work off each other on screen. It takes place in the future, and it does remind me of Judge Dredd. So what do I give Demolition Man? Well, I'll give it 4 Beanie Babies. Days of Thunder. Some people thought this film was a turkey when it came out, but it has a lot of good dramatic elements in it, and it kind of feels like Rocky in a race car movie. If you love NASCAR, and I don't know why you would, but I'm just kidding. This is one of those classic driving movies you got to check out. Days of Thunder. There's great actors in it, not just Tom Cruise, and it also has a hilarious moment where the boys are in the hospital and they're in wheelchairs, and they're still racing each other in their wheelchairs down the halls of the hospital building, just like how they were before they got fucked up in their cars. And it's hilarious. There's good brotherhood in this film, and there's good comedy, and there's good dramatic stuff. It's a really good movie, Days of Thunder. How could you go wrong with that title? I give it 3.5 Beanie Babies. Almost Heroes. Unfortunately, Chris Farley passed away before this film was released. And Matthew Perry from Friends is in it, and he's actually pretty funny in it. I love Chris Farley, by the way. He's one of my top favorite comedians. This movie is hilarious. There's this hilarious scene with Chris Farley, like, stealing this egg from this nest, and this giant eagle attacks him, and oh my God. Yeah, this movie is so funny, and it's underrated. Very underrated. Kind of like the title. They're almost heroes, because apparently no one cared about this film. I think there was no marketing for it. I think that was why it just went unnoticed, which is a fucking shame. I give Almost Heroes, I'll give it 4 Beanie Babies. Fuck it. A Time to Kill. So I watched this, I think, in high school, and this is a very, very dark film, and I think it's based off of a true story. What's weird about the film is that it feels like extremely similar to Kill a Mockingbird. It feels like the same movie, but it's like To Kill a Mockingbird in the 90s. And of course, both titles have the word kill in it. And like I said, it's very dark and very controversial, and it's excellent. I think it's one of the best movies of all time. Definitely. Definitely. I do highly recommend it, and it is a little too serious, especially compared to all these other films I mentioned. But I'll definitely give it 4.5 Beanie Babies. The Craft. Oh my God. You guys want to see some cute girls being devious and practicing witchcraft? Look no further than The Craft. In the 90s, witchcraft stuff, there's just something about this film I really love. It's a very, very creepy film. The god that the girls call upon in the film was made up for the film because they didn't want real people in real life to conjure the god that they conjure in the film, so it was completely made up. There's something captivating about this film. I'm against witchcraft. I don't agree with it, but that's why I love the movie so much, because it's so fun to be bad. I know they made a new Craft TV show. Not Kraft Mac and Cheese. This is The Craft. And that sucks because it doesn't have any of the original girls, which is really stupid. They should have made The Craft 2, and it should have had all 4 of the originals. Yeah, the girls are really adorable. It's so entertaining, I'm actually going to give it 5 Beanie Babies. Homeward Bound, The Incredible Journey. A highly underrated film. This is another film no one talks about at all anymore. But this is a film where the animals talk. It's funny, and they made a sequel. It was just around the time where they used to make entertaining kids' movies. The 90s was like the golden age of kids' movies, because in the 90s they actually made the films entertaining for both adults and children. It wasn't like just like really stupid like toddler humor and stuff. It was like really awesome. And I loved the journey the characters went on together. I have so many fond memories about this trio. It really was something very special. And doesn't them walking on the wood there kind of remind you of The Lion King with Timon and Pumbaa and Simba when he's growing up? I'm going to give Homeward Bound 4 Beanie Babies. I love this film. Balto. There's so many big Balto fans out there. Balto is a major classic. It's one of the greatest cartoon movies of the 90s. And it's a Universal film. The animation's stunning. It's based on a true story. It's incredibly sad, and I especially used to watch it in elementary school. You know, they bring the TV in. Love that shit. There was also a Balto 2. Yeah, Balto is just amazing. It's just one of those films that just like is super 90s. It just brings you all the way back to that special era of why the 90s was such an amazing decade. I give Balto 5 Beanie Babies. Jungle to Jungle. This film is extremely nostalgic to me. I remember watching it when I was a kid quite a bit. And the boy's like an Indian. It's really interesting. And the reason why I picked this out in particular is because it just reminds me of how big Tim Allen was in the 90s and how Tim Allen became like a kids movie icon because he was also in other kids movies that were also funny for adults. That's what I'm talking about, guys. They used to do this. They don't do this anymore, where it's entertaining for adults and kids and both. And It's a classic movie, Jungle to Jungle. There's funny parts in it. It's debatable whether it's a great movie or not, but I really enjoyed it. And the actor who plays the Indian in the film, the Indian boy, he appeared in a bunch of other stuff at the time. He was like a 90s icon too. I'm going to give it 3.5 Beanie Babies. All Dogs Go to Heaven 2. Yes, I absolutely love All Dogs Go to Heaven 1. I think it's one of the greatest films of all time. The first All Dogs Go to Heaven is a definite 5 Beanie Babies. But for All Dogs Go to Heaven 2, I love it. In ways, it's a little superior to the original. There's a new villain in the film named Red, and he's basically the devil, and he captures all the dogs in dog cages. You got him coming down from heaven, and all this stuff is just so amazing and so imaginative, and they don't make animated feature films like this anymore. The 90s really was the golden age of animation. Definitely. The whole thing with the horn and Carface, which is a parody of Scarface. And what's interesting is that in the first All Dogs Go to Heaven, the main character was a little girl, and in the sequel, the main character is a little boy. All Dogs Go to Heaven 2, I give it 4 Beanie Babies. George of the jungle, fast as he can be. Watch out for that tree. Da-na-na. Great movie, really entertaining. This is like Brendan Fraser, like at the top of his game. It's one of his most memorable film roles. This is another film, unfortunately, people don't talk about it anymore. And it has moments that are really funny, and the characters are really endearing. I just remember so many fond memories of watching this when I was really young. 3.5 Beanie Babies. Casper! Seeing is believing. This movie's amazing. I give it 5 Beanie Babies. It's one of my favorite movies. And there's just something about it that's hard to describe and hard to say. There's just something about this film in particular that's like, it's one of the most 90s artifacts of all time. There's just something so like drenching and steeped in the 90s in this film, Casper, from 1995. I just loved it so much. The story was so amazing. This is like the real 90s right here. And there was lots of Casper sequels, and I'll talk about that in my other VHS childhood videos. Casper, like I said, 5 Beanie Babies, fucking phenomenal. Definitely. Muppet Treasure Island. Now, this was always one of my favorite movies growing up, and it was always one of my favorite Muppet movies, and I thought it was amazing when I was growing up, but I rewatched it as an adult, and sadly I don't think it's as amazing as I used to think, but I still think it's a great movie, and it's funny, and it was memorable, and there's just so many charming things about the film, like the special effects and the music. What they did with the love story with Piggy and Kermit was really charming in this film. There's just something really touching about the way this film was produced. Muppet Treasure Island, a major classic. I'm going to give it a solid 4 Beanie Babies. Predator 2. Yes, I do think Predator 2 is better than the first Predator. And this one has Danny Glover in it. And this time, there's a different Predator, and he's younger and more flamboyant. At least that's what the back of the box says. Look at this cover. Look how, like, mysterious and badass it is. I don't know why the second Predator is so underrated. I mean, really, guys, just because Arnold wasn't in the second movie, do you guys really did you guys really have to like knock the film down when it came out? Arnold was only one of the best parts of the first Predator. He wasn't the best part. There was a lot of great actors, characters, and the Predator himself that made the first Predator great. It wasn't just Arnold. Predator 2 rules. I give Predator 2 a solid 4 Beanie Babies out of 5. Tyson. This is a movie where an actor plays Mike Tyson. It's really entertaining. I think it's a great movie. And I wish they made a boxing movie for every boxer, and maybe they will. They just released the new George Foreman movie, which was great. Man, there's just something about this film that the cover reminds me of Rocky. I love how honest the film is. It doesn't portray Mike as like this completely innocent guy. They show all sides of him, like the sleazy side of him, the bad side, and the good side. And they show why he turned bad sometimes and did some things he regretted later on. Mike Tyson today is a completely different human being than he was in the 90s. Don King in the film, the actor that plays Don King, is phenomenal. I give Tyson 4 Beanie Babies. King Ralph. I love King Ralph. I love this movie. John Goodman is one of my favorite actors. He's hilarious in this movie. And I think the 90s was definitely a golden age for Mr. Goodman. There's a plot of another movie that is exactly the same as this film, and I can't remember what the movie is, but it's just really odd that it's exactly the same as this film. And I don't remember. Oh, maybe like Mr. Deeds. Mr. Deeds is just like this movie, with Adam Sandler. But this is like before Mr. Deeds. But anyway, this movie's hilarious. It's underrated. I mean, there are people that talk about it, but anyway, yeah, I definitely give King Ralph 4 Beanie Babies. It was that entertaining. Con Air, great action movie. Great actors. It's unpredictable at times. I loved the redemption story with Steve Buscemi's character, and I love how he learned his lesson, and he decided he wasn't going to be a bad guy anymore by the end of the film. The film just keeps going and going, and it's a real thrill ride. It's definitely a great movie. I think it's one of Nicolas Cage's best roles. A badass late 90s movie. You gotta love it. I give Con Air 4 Beanie Babies. Why the fuck not? Waterworld, a film that a lot of people complain about, and for some reason, there's a lot of people that think this film sucks, and I don't agree. I thought Waterworld was really cool. It kind of flopped when it came out, but the concept of the film is, I think, really interesting. Like the whole world is submerged in water, and it's like a new society. And the villain is a memorable actor, and his name escapes me. He played Bowser in the Super Mario Brothers movie from the 90s. And that movie's underrated, by the way. I don't care what anyone says. Waterworld's a good movie, though. Definitely. And it deserves another rewatch. The only problem I have in the film is when Kevin Costner first appears, he's taking a piss in the water, which is disgusting. I don't know why that has to be the first scene you show his character. I mean, really? Come on. But anyway, other than that, just ignore that. That is not an analogy for the film. Waterworld's a good movie. I give Waterworld 3 Beanie Babies. Spice World. How embarrassing is it that I actually like this film? The girls are smoking hot. The plot is actually pretty fun. It's a really silly movie, but it actually kind of made me a Spice Girls fan, and it got me to listen to their music as an adult. The girls are really charming in this film, and it reminds me of the Beatles' A Hard Day's Night. And I enjoy the stuff that happens in the film, and it really feels like you're with them and you're... Roger Moore is also in this movie, which is hilarious because he plays a character that is basically Charlie in Charlie's Angels. This whole movie is like a 90s parody of Charlie's Angels. And of course, Mr. Roger Moore was James Bond. What do I give Spice World? I'm going to give Spice Girls 3 Beanie Babies. The Doors. Yes. Excellent movie. Val Kilmer, once again, just kills it. Excellent actor, right? Underrated actor, right, guys? I mean, a little underrated. It gets way too sad at the end, and I understand when movies get sad, it's good, but it's also too sad, where it's like, come on, you don't have to be that depressing. Like Roger Ebert, who I loved as a movie critic, that was one of his complaints about the film, because these are heroes of rock, and we don't need to see them be that downtrodden. I understand he had a hard life, but still, I don't believe the story of the Doors was that dark. I think it was maybe over-exaggerated a little bit for the film, but this is a great movie, and he does really look like Jim Morrison. And all the other actors that play the members of the band really look like the members of the band. It really is those same people again. That's what it feels like. It's definitely Val Kilmer's probably greatest movie. And ironically, I don't think it's his most entertaining movie. But I will give The Doors 4 Beanie Babies. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie. The greatest Power Rangers movie of them all. I picked this one out in particular to list because of its nostalgia value. But aside from that, the biggest reason I brought it out was because the amount of work they put into the costumes in this film is spectacular for a kids movie. It's a kids movie, and they actually cared about making the costumes look really, really different from the show, really cool, like improvements to the costumes from the show. Adults used to care about making great kids movies. Now they don't give a shit. It's really sad. Anyway, I love the actor that plays Ivan Ooze, and he was so cool when I was a kid. And there's a funny story about him. He had to go to the hospital during the shoot one time because he hurt himself. He hurt like his leg. And they didn't have time to take off the prosthetics and the makeup on his face. So when he went to the hospital and he was lying on the bed, his face was bright purple like this. So everyone walking by, they didn't know he was an actor in the new Power Rangers movie. And everybody was looking at him like, oh my God, what happened to him? That's hilarious. I wish Ivan Ooze was a character that reappeared in the show. And that sucks. Really, 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 really sucks that he only appeared in the movie. Love this movie. I will forever love this movie, and I still defend it. Uh-oh, we're in trouble. So I'm going to give it a great rating, giving it 4 Beanie Babies. Beavis and Butthead Do America. The title's funny. My memory of this film is when I went into Blockbuster back in the day. It was during a time where I didn't even know who Beavis and Butthead were. And I would see this cover and I would think that they look extremely, extremely creepy. It just creeped the fuck out of me when I was a young kid. And I thought the humor, because no one told me anything about them, anything about the show, I assumed the humor was so adult, so disgusting, so sleazy. I assumed all these things based on the R rating and whatever. I don't even think it's rated R, but other adults made me, as a young kid, they assumed that it was the most repulsive, nastiest, most vile, inappropriate, dark thing that existed. And when you watch Beavis and Butthead, it's like, it's not. It's not at all like that. So all those people assumed the wrong thing. But it kind of mystified things like South Park and Beavis and Butthead, like the image of them, and made them look like mysterious. And it was kind of cool, actually, that feeling. Even though all those people were wrong, but this is a really funny movie. I also saw the sequel recently, Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe. It was also pretty good. I give this film 3 Beanie Babies. The Mask of Zorro. Look how badass that cover is. Antonio Banderas and Anthony Hopkins. This is a really good movie. It's probably the greatest Zorro movie, even though, to be fair, I haven't really watched many Zorro movies, even though he's a cool, famous fictional character. I'm not sure if he's based off a real person, but it's a very cool movie, and it's one of Antonio Banderas' greatest films. It was awesome because they made it in the 90s, and I love that 90s style and the filmography. And it also has some really funny moments. I give Mask of Zorro, I'll give it 3 Beanie Babies. James and the Giant Peach, one of the greatest, and these days, underrated films of all time, because no one talks about this film anymore. 2 thumbs way up, I completely agree. I definitely gave it 5 Beanie Babies. The animation in this film is phenomenal. It's really nostalgic, and it's relatable what James goes through, and the characters are all hilarious, and it's one of those creepy experiences, animation-wise. And it's that creepy charm that only the 90s gave us. The 80s and 90s only gave us. I just love it. I love everything about this film, and the world would never be the same without it. The World Is Not Enough is one of my favorite James Bond films. I think it's Pierce Brosnan's best. I think it's an underrated Bond film, even though it actually made the most money at the box office of one of the James Bond films. This film is great. And there's a lot of really cynical Bond fans out there that don't think the world is not enough. They don't think it's great. They give it some bad ratings, and I really don't get it. The villain in it was really cool, Renard. I enjoyed the humor in it, the subtlety of the humor. There's a lot of like amazing twists in the film. It makes you think of like childhood pretty much, because this was the time when Pierce Brosnan was on his role as being James Bond, the GoldenEye era. This was his 3rd outing as James Bond. You gotta love The World Is Not Enough. I give The World Is Not Enough 4 Beanie Babies. Star Trek Generations. This is another film that gets hated on. I don't get it. I think it's one of the best TNG Star Trek films. It was a really clever way they got two captains from hundreds of years apart together using time travel in Star Trek. The two of them together, like, they're both great actors, and the two of them together is awesome. William Shatner and sorry, I forget his name. I know he's a very famous actor. I actually love Star Trek Generations. Yes, it could have been better, but come on. I think Star Trek Generations is a really good movie. I think it's cool. I like the way Kirk died. I know that's a spoiler, sorry. I liked the way he died. He died like a hero. And like Red Letter Media complained that, oh, well, Kirk died with some rocks at the end of the movie. And it's like, okay, yeah, well, he's like a hero. That's cool. It's cool that he died like that. It's like he dies in the wastelands. Yeah, Kirk didn't need some big fancy funeral. He was a warrior. That's how he always portrayed himself. Star Trek Generations, I think, is really good. I give it 3.5 Beanie Babies. Star Trek First Contact is the other really good Star Trek film from the Next Generation. The first two Next Generation Star Trek films were better than the last two, and I think First Contact is pretty awesome. The Borg being the villains in the film was really cool with the special effects. There's a lot of great battles. You got the black cube going on in it. First Contact rules, and Red Letter Media, they're way too harsh on it once again. Come on, guys. This is a good movie. You don't have to be that cynical. Like, it's cool to be cynical because you review it, but you don't have to be like overbearing about the whole experience. Just enjoy the damn movie, at least for the parts in it that are good. Now, come on. I think it's a good movie. First Contact, I'm going to give it 3.5 Beanie Babies. Steven Seagal is Out for Justice. This is one of my favorite Steven Seagal movies. A lot of action. There's an excellent scene where he fights people in a bar in the basement. I just love how he just goes around. He's got his big shotgun. I love this cover. Look how cool this is. He's a cop. It's a dirty job, but somebody's got to take out the garbage. Now, you see how I'm doing that deep old man voice? That was really cool in the 90s during the trailers. I still remember that. I still wish that was in trailers, and they don't do that anymore. Sucks! Out for Justice rules. Really good. It's one of his best movies. It's a guilty pleasure because it doesn't do anything too different, but he's so entertaining, I don't care. So I'm going to have to give Out for Justice classic 3 Beanie Baby film. Lethal Weapon 4. I think the fourth one is definitely one of the best Lethal Weapon films. And Joe Pesci is hilarious in it. Like the Gone with the Wind of buddy cop movies. Danny Glover's great in it. Mel Gibson. I love the scene where they fight the guy in the rain underneath the docks, and him and Danny Glover both look at each other and they're like getting ready to go. By the way, it's bullshit. Okay, you got Mel on this side. That makes sense. How come Danny Glover's not on this side? Racist. Well, whatever. Yeah, that bothers me. He's not on the side. Jet Li's in it, and it really ended on a high note. And I'm so glad they kept going and didn't just give up, because these were great characters. They were entertaining. So I'm going to give Lethal Weapon 4 3.5 Beanie Babies. Friday. Really good movie. Classic movie. Everyone knows this movie. Rest in peace to Zeus. I really love the movie Clerks, and what's interesting is that this reminds me of the movie Clerks. This is kind of like the black version of Clerks, and because it's the same thing as Clerks. It's two guys hanging out, and people run into them, and they're crazy and weird, and funny stuff happens. And both this film and Clerks are really down-to-earth, relatable comedies. It sucks that they can't make a new Friday. And I think Chris Tucker said he's interested in doing it, but these stupid movie companies don't want to make it, which sucks. Ice Cube proves he's an awesome actor with this film and other films. There's also an actor in this movie that appeared in the Wayans Brothers show, which is hilarious. Pops. And Bernie Mac, hilarious. It's a definite 3 Beanie Babies. Coneheads, based off the 70s Saturday Night Live skit. They both return. They were in the original skits. She wasn't. She's a different actress. It was really like the return of the Coneheads to the 90s, and it was a great concept that they made it into a movie, because you can see the idea of a movie in the 70s skits that became very popular. This movie sort of half flopped, even though it's a good movie. I think the reason it half flopped was because there's so many young people that don't even know what the Coneheads were. Only like the older people at the time knew. And Chris Farley plays the boyfriend in the movie. In the original skits, there's a different actress that played the daughter to the Coneheads. She was a main cast member of Saturday Night Live. I don't remember her name, but she does appear later on the Coneheads planet. I do think this is a good movie. I think it's a little underrated. I think it got too harsh of critics at the time. I mean, come on, it's the damn Coneheads. This is a cool movie. It's funny. It makes you nostalgic for the old SNL. I'm going to give it 3 Beanie Babies. Here come the men in black. Once again, the 90s, like, nostalgic foil, sparkle stuff. Looking back on Men in Black, I don't think it's as good as we used to think it was, at least for me. I think it's a pretty good movie. Great? Not really. I think it's a pretty good movie, and Tommy Lee Jones was an icon of the 90s, and so was Will Smith, so putting them together was a great combination. I also remember there was a Men in Black cartoon back in the day that kind of sucked. I'll give Men in Black 3 Beanie Babies. The People versus Larry Flint. Woody Harrelson is great in this movie. Courtney Love, Edward Norton. There's a lot of things in this film that are extremely predictable. That's how I felt the film was as I watched it. I only watched it one time, and I really never even heard of this film. It's really good, though. I think it's definitely based on a true story. 3.5 Beanie Babies. An underrated Woody Harrelson film. Hoop Dreams. This used to be a big hit back in the 90s, this film, and it inspired a lot of people to go for their dreams, whether it be basketball or art or whatever the hell you're into. It's basically documenting this kid's life growing up in the ghetto, trying to become a basketball star and play in the NBA. And I think he succeeds to a degree. I think a lot of people can relate to this film. And it's something that people can feel emotionally, the same things he goes through in this film that have been going on for generations. Now, they could have had actors playing all of this, but they had a film crew film the whole thing. So it's kind of like a biopic of his life. Hoop Dreams is a really, it's a great movie. I'll give it 4 Beanie Babies. Man on the Moon, starring Jim Carrey in one of his greatest performances. This is a film about the comedian Andy Kaufman, who was infamous in the 1970s. And I love Andy Kaufman. I think he was like a revolutionary comedian where he didn't do everything by the books. He wasn't a traditional comedian at all. He made people question what was funny, and he was like fascinating. And the humor of Andy Kaufman, I feel like it was felt in the 2000s. Like he was ahead of his time, like beyond ahead of his time. Jim Carrey idolized the man, so he basically did method acting to perform as Andy Kaufman, and he sounds exactly like Andy Kaufman. Now, I'm into like spiritualism and stuff, so I actually believe that he literally took on the actual spirit of Andy Kaufman using like the occult and stuff like that, and I don't agree with that. However, I mean, it's almost like it isn't really Jim Carrey. He like literally took the spirit from the actual soul of Andy Kaufman. And so this is like Andy Kaufman coming back to life, because there was all this famous rumor about Andy Kaufman faked his death, and a lot of people still think he's alive. And at this point, he could still be alive. I mean, he'd be pretty darn old, but this is a great movie. It's funny. I think it really pulls at the heartstrings. It's a great movie. I'll give it 4 Beanie Babies. Dragon, the Bruce Lee story. Now, this is a movie where an actor played Bruce Lee, and it was honoring the dragon, the late, great Bruce Lee. And it shows him going through his whole life, how he was on the Green Hornet TV show, how he teamed up with Golden Harvest to make all those great movies. I know this isn't important, but I actually think the actress that played his wife in the movie, she's way hotter in the movie than the actual woman that was really Bruce's wife in real life. Not that she isn't attractive, but she's like 10 times hotter than the real woman. There's also these like dream sequences where Bruce sees what's going to happen to him, like the fate of his death, and it's really cool. Like, it's really well done the way it's handled. And the actor does kind of look like Bruce Lee, but he can definitely fight. I highly recommend it for any Bruce Lee fan. Check out Dragon. I give it 4 Beanie Babies. Dripped in blood. Simply Irresistible, starring Sarah Michelle Gellar. Now, I can't remember if this is before she played Buffy the Vampire Slayer. This is a chick flick, and it's a pretty mediocre one. She, like, works in this restaurant. There's something nostalgic about this movie. It feels like, you know, once again, like it's very 90s. Sarah Michelle Gellar is so hot in this movie. She's such a cutie patootie in this movie. She's real easy on the eyes, so Sarah is simply irresistible. The title is fucking perfect. Now, the only reason to watch this film is because Sarah is so cute. But other than her, there's really, well, whatever. I'm going to give it 2 Beanie Babies. South Park, bigger, longer, and uncut. This is the movie that was released in the theaters in 1999. This is when South Park, like, took over the world. I have a lot of mixed feelings about South Park, and I actually wasn't into it back in the day. But I rewatched all the classic episodes and the movie, and what I have to say is I think the movie's a lot better than the show. I loved the movie, and I just loved the animation in it, and the story was fun. There's something really nostalgic about this movie because it brings you back to that era where cursing was so much more not in vogue, unlike today. It was so much more inappropriate for children to curse, and this film, and South Park in general, but especially this film, like, parodied that in society. Like, this film just brings you back to the angst of the kids of the 90s. So for that, it's really nostalgic. You know how Kenny always dies in the show when he comes back to life? Well, in this movie, he literally dies and stays dead and he goes to hell. He comes back later. I mean, sorry, spoilers, but I love the dated nature of the film, and that's why I love the 90s. I like the old world that I used to grow up in. It's so goddamn entertaining. I'm going to give it 4 Beanie Babies. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles trilogy from the 90s. Cowabunga, dudes! Yeah! First, let's look at the original movie from 1990. I love this movie, and I remember seeing this as a kid, and I thought it was just amazing. And I still think it's amazing. Like, the costumes are amazing. They even curse a little bit in the film. It's really faithful to the show, and once again, it has a lot of care in, like, making it appeal to adults as well. And Shredder rules in the movie. I mean, he's so badass. He looks like Darth Vader. There's things in this film that are, like, poignant to society's issues with deviance in society and all that. And that's kind of how the Turtles are. I thought the Muppet that was Splinter in the film looked excellent, and he spoke just like how he did in the cartoon. This movie is amazing. I don't care what anyone says. It's not overrated at all. It deserves all the praise that it gets. I'm going to give the first Turtles movie, I'm going to give it 3.5 Beanie Babies. Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze. This is a really good movie. They toned down some of the action because parents complained that the first film was too violent, which is ridiculous. And I love this shot. Look how great they look there. That is sick. So nostalgic. It's not as good as the first movie, and also Vanilla Ice appears in the film, which, yeah, you could say is funny, but I actually like Vanilla Ice. I don't think he's, like, overrated or anything. I think he was cool. I get it. All right, anyway. So I like that he's in the film. There are some disappointing things to the film, kind of like I already mentioned with the action, but there is some decent action. Another disappointing thing about the film is that later on they fight Super Shredder, and he's, like, bigger, and Super Shredder gets freaking destroyed by a deck of wood. The Turtles don't even get to fight him, so that's a bunch of turtle shit. The Secret of the Ooze is good, though. I'm going to give it 3 Beanie Babies. Classic 90s. Ninja Turtles 3. A lot of things have been said about this film. There's people that despise it. Look, then I can see why you would dislike the movie. Like fans of the cartoon don't like this movie, hate this movie, because it doesn't use any of the characters from the cartoon, and the cartoon had so many, like, different imaginative characters. Yeah, this film is a downgrade by comparison to the Turtles 1 and 2. The villain is pretty boring. I don't know, though. I think it's a decent movie. I think the hate is a little too much. I don't think it's terrible by any means. I mean, it could have been much better. Like, if you're an 80s kid, then you probably hate this movie. Or think it's pretty bad. But I'm a 90s kid, and I remember the cartoon, but I wasn't like a huge fan of the cartoon or whatever. I mostly played with the Turtles toys back in the day instead of the cartoon. I'm going to give this film actually 3 Beanie Babies. I'm going to be a little nice to it. The Rat Pack movie. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I think this was a TV movie. It has a lot of famous actors in it. Joe Mantegna, however the fuck you pronounce that. He's pretty good in it. Ray Liotta is supposed to be Frank Sinatra, and he looks nothing like Frank Sinatra. And Don Cheadle is Sammy Davis Jr., and Sammy Davis Jr. Is my favorite member of the Rat Pack. This is a really good movie. It's just done really well, and I like the story, even though quite a bit of the members of the Rat Pack in this film do not look like the original people of the Rat Pack. It's very well done, so 3 Beanie Babies. The Birdcage. Now, the plot of this film is pretty extremely stereotypical from what we've already seen in the past. It basically follows this gay couple, and it's a hilarious movie. They're all excellent in it. Gene Hackman. Nathan Lane is phenomenal in the movie. Nathan Lane is an excellent actor. He's probably one of my favorite actors, Nathan Lane. He's been in so many great things. Mouse Hunt, this movie. I think it's a great movie. I think it's very entertaining. Just as long as you don't take what's in the film too seriously, then I think you'll enjoy it. I give The Birdcage 3 Beanie Babies. Rumble in the Bronx. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe this is the film that first made Jackie Chan an international star, so this is the film that really had him break out in America. Man, this film really shows the pure skill, athletic skill of Mr. Chan and his karate abilities. The plot is pretty cool. There's lots of fights. I like the relationship he has with the girl in the movie. It reminds me of a lot of anime I watched, especially 90s anime. Of course, Jackie Chan is funny in this movie. He's also not just a karate guy, he's also an action guy. He's also a comedian. We all know that about Jackie. I love the moment in the film where he tries to definitely show the punk gang why they're wrong and how they've gone too far, and they actually see his point of view, because Jackie Chan's character in the film, he really tries to understand where they're coming from. He's not just like, oh, I don't screw you guys. And I love the connection between the two of them, that Jackie Chan's character brought them together. I never see that in these kind of movies. It's always usually like, oh, the punks are jerks and that's the end. And it's like, no, that's good. That was understanding. Rumble in the Bronx, classic movie. 3 Beanie Babies. Blade. Blade is actually one of my favorite movie series. I'm a huge Blade fan, and I'm a big Wesley Snipes fan. I fucking love Blade. I really do. Blade 1 and 2, I think, are phenomenal. I'm going to give the first Blade 4 Beanie Babies. I love this movie, and the way they present this tape with the silver. You know, I had no idea that Blade was actually a Marvel superhero. I would have never known that unless I did some research. Wesley was the perfect actor to portray this character. And I love the backstory, and the action is sick. The soundtrack to this film is sick. Everything about Blade is really, really cool. It was a big hit, you know, but I think the Blade movies are a little underrated. I wish the third Blade movie was better, and I heard they're making a new Blade movie, and it's not starring Wesley as Blade. Man, I can't tell you how mad I am about that. I should do that in a whole separate video. So yeah, like I said, I give Blade 1 4 Beanie Babies. Classic movie. I'm a huge DBZ fan, and this is one of the Dragon Ball Z movies from the 90s. The Tree of Might. Where are these other Saiyans that they didn't know about? Well, I think one of them's a Saiyan. Well, they're all Saiyans, actually, and they plant this tree on Earth, and Goku and the gang have to defeat them. What's amazing about this film is that it's the only movie And actually, the only time in the entire series where all of the Z Warriors all fight together against all the villains. So that makes this movie special, and we get to see Chaozu in action. If you know DBZ characters, you know who I'm talking about. He's got the white clown makeup. This film aired on television in 1999 on Toonami's Cartoon Network. I love this movie. I think Tree of Might is easily one of the best DBZ movies. The first four or five early classic DBZ movies, I give them all 5 Beanie Babies. So I give Tree of Might 5 Beanie Babies. Yes, it is that good. Sorry, I really love Tree of Might. Rules. I love the ending. The ending's great. The Addams Family, the live-action version. When they brought the Addams Family back, they did it 3 times, and the third time they had different actors portray them. And they had a sequel to this called Addams Family Values, but we're not here to talk about that. And that's good, too. It's a really good movie. Very good. All the actors are funny. This actor, whatever his name is, he's hilarious in it. Brings you back to a time where practical effects were, and she was excellent in it, too, where practical effects were very enjoyable in movies. And in the 90s was when they started making movies based off of classic TV shows, and it's bringing them back with different actors portraying them. They did it a couple of times. They did that with the Flintstones, the Beverly Hillbillies, and they also did the Addams Family. Really great idea that they did this, and I love the Thing. Not the Thing from the Fantastic Four, but this Thing. Addams Family, 3 Beanie Babies. Stargate. I love Stargate. Stargate is up there as one of my top favorite movies of all time. I give Stargate 5 Beanie Babies. My favorite movie of all time is Space Jam, and this is up there. I think it's an underrated movie, looking back on the movie, because it was successful. It made money, but it didn't make as much money as I think it should have, and I think they should have had more marketing behind it. I mean, they do have Kurt Russell in it, and he was a big, famous actor. James Spader, I think he's amazing in the movie. I mean, for what the movie is, I think he's amazing in it. And the film reminds me a lot of Star Wars. The whole thing with the Egyptians, how they have all the power and the technology. And I love the conspiracy stuff in this film, how it relates to the real world and all that. And I gotta check out the old Stargate TV series that came out after the movie, because a lot of people say the TV series is actually better than the original movie. But I adore this film, and I wish the Stargate series became just as popular as Star Trek and Star Wars. And it never did. And that's ridiculous. I mean, for a window of time, it kind of seemed like it was during the early 2000s, but it's come on. And I wish that they made more Stargate movies with Kurt Russell and James Spader. I wish they did Stargate 2, 3, 4, and 5. They did have 2 other Stargate movies, and they were based off of the TV series, which is pretty cool. But I wish they kept making them from the original actors. There is a rumor that Stargate is coming back with a new movie. That would be amazing. I hope James Spader's in it. Ah, yes. Haven't I talked about this film enough? No, you can never stop talking about how amazing this film is. Well, like I said earlier, it's my favorite movie. 5 Beanie Babies, for sure. 5 basketball Beanie Babies. I just think there's something special about this film. For some reason, it makes me feel like it's like a representation of the 90s. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love it so much. This movie is like the most 90s thing ever. So I think that's why it's so divisive. I just don't understand why you wouldn't be able to love this film. I think the criticisms towards it are way too harsh. Like I said, 5 goddamn Beanie Babies. Poetic Justice, starring Janet Jackson and Tupac. I had mixed feelings about this film when I watched it. It's kind of slow-paced, and it's basically a romance movie between Tupac and Janet. It's classic. The way it's done is entertaining, and it's actually rather touching watching it throughout the film. I just wish that romance was more like this in real life. I mean, it is actually, the more I think about it. Unlike other movies, the romance that happens in this movie between the 2 characters, it is actually down to earth. Airheads. This is a really good movie, and I love the plot, and it's definitely like Howard Stern, this movie. People don't talk about Airheads anymore. I love how it comments on the faults of the record industry, and how it's always been a huge problem. And so their journey in this film is very relatable. And Chris Farley's in it too as a police officer. I wish he was more in the film. Really good. What else can I say? 3 Beanie Babies. Air Force One, starring Mr. Ford. I only saw this, I think, once. From what I remember is that it's great. Basically, he's the president. The plane gets hijacked by terrorists, and all kinds of anything crazy shit goes on this plane. Harrison Ford played the president like a bunch of times in the 90s. This is a great movie. I'm going to give it 3.5 Beanie Babies. Suburban Commando. Yes, this is one of the cheesy Hulk Hogan movies from the early 90s. And Christopher Lloyd is in it, shockingly. I don't know, actually. I thought it was a decent movie. It has jokes that fail so badly that it kind of like makes you shocked that they even would attempt certain jokes. But I think the idea is actually pretty fun. People think this movie's terrible. It's not terrible. Sure, it's something about it that's classic 90s, and I enjoy that. I enjoy it when it's corny and sunny. I like that stuff, so I'm gonna try to give it a pass. So I'm gonna say it's kind of a decent movie. I'll give it 3 Beanie Babies. Now this is a real treat. Here we got Grumpy Old Men. It's really funny. It's great for all ages, and what I love about the message of the film is that it's like life doesn't end when you become old. You can still have fun and act young despite your age. It's really funny, like they curse and stuff. I don't know, I just really enjoyed them. And what's really cool is that the first film, Grumpy Old Men, takes place with snow, and the second film, Grumpier Old Men, takes place during the summer. So I really like how they did that. And I love this classic 90s rewind. Doesn't that rule? For some reason, the duo of Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau in the Grumpy Old Men movies, they remind me so much of Siskel and Ebert, the old movie critics that I thought were a hilarious duo. It's like they both are very different from one another, but at the same time, they both have things they can relate to, and they're actually best friends, even though they get on each other's nerves so much. It just reminds me so much of that. Siskel and Ebert I love so much, and wonder if they can if Siskel and Ebert related to this duo when they reviewed those films, even if they didn't want to admit it. What do I give Grumpy Old Men? The first one, I'll give it 3 Beanie Babies. Grumpier Old Men is actually a little better. I give Grumpier Old Men 3.5 Beanie Babies. Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon, classic 90s duo. Rudy. Rudy is a big deal, especially amongst sports fans. I really didn't understand what this movie was about until I saw it, although I heard a lot of rumors about it. I think it's a great movie. I love and adore and cherish the message of the film, and it's so relatable regardless of whether it's sports or anything else. It's extremely inspirational. There's just something about it that touches your soul. I don't care who you are, what color you are, whatever. Rudy gets 4 Beanie Babies. The Brady Bunch movie. The Brady Bunch movie, I love. It's basically making fun of the Brady Bunch. It's kind of a parody of the Brady Bunch while being legitimately like a Brady Bunch movie. And you got all these different actors playing the roles of the original cast members from the 70s. So much of them really do look like the original actors from the Brady Bunch. The jokes in it are really funny, and it's a real treat. I give it 3 Beanie Babies. Malcolm X, a very serious movie. What I have to say in this video is that I'm a fan of Malcolm X. I think this film does an excellent job of showing like Malcolm's faults as a human being and his triumphs, and I enjoy that the film shows the hypocrisy of the media, and I enjoy how it shows how like what the truth really was, like, and how there were certain movements that weren't bad that people thought were bad, like the Black Panthers. And I really enjoy how they portrayed Malcolm in this film. Denzel Washington is a great actor, of course. What do I give Malcolm X? I'll give it 3.5 Beanie Babies. Boys in the Hood, really good movie. It's actually kind of like the movie Friday, except just serious. It's relatable. I haven't seen it in a long time. I know there's violence, there's drama. It's very entertaining, and just something about the way like the text is written on here. It's so like nostalgic. I didn't like it this much, So I'll give it 3 Beanie Babies. Wayne's World, party time, excellent. Looking back at Wayne's World, it's not as funny, I think, than that other people say. So the first Wayne's World movie, it's basically kickstarting the film career of Mike Myers, who of course later on became Austin Powers. I love Dana Carvey. I think he's hilarious. He's kind of an underrated comedian. These are, of course, based off the big hit 90s skits from Saturday Night Live. What do I give the first Wayne's World? While I do think it's entertaining and humorous, I do think there's certain jokes that aren't as funny as the film acts like they are. It does definitely remind me of Beavis and Butthead, only not nearly as funny. I'm going to give the first Wayne's World 3 Beanie Babies, just because it's a 90s classic. Wayne's World 2, I actually think is funnier than the first one. There's all these like segments in the film I remember that made me laugh, and I think the plot was more creative. The first one, plot of the first movie was kind of generic. This one tried to do different things and was more creative, so I'll give it the same rating though. It didn't wow me that much more, so I'll give it 3 Beanie Babies. Next, we have The Cable Guy. I love this cover. It might be one of my favorite movies. I think it's underrated. It had mixed reception when it came out. There's something about this film that reminds me so much of the video game character Gex from the 90s, because Gex's lines remind me of Jim Carrey, and Gex was obsessed with television, and so is Jim Carrey. The film actually has a dark side to it towards the end, and I thought it was interesting. It did make me laugh, this film. Just something I love about this film. It's like so like steeped in the 90s, like Space Jam, like how big cable was, and I loved TV in the 90s and the 2000s, and I missed TV from that era, like how cool it was, and people used VHS tapes to save things on TV, and I missed that shit. And you know, with the fuzzy TVs and everything, and I miss the old TVs with the fat backs. As you can see, I still have them. But really, really love this film. I'm going to give it 4 Beanie Babies. That's right, it's that good. Jason Goes to Hell. For some reason, this cover does not include the final part of the title. The full title is Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. I actually like this movie. And it's interesting because most Friday the 13th fans hate this film and think it dishonors Jason's character. I actually found it pretty enjoyable. I like the different ideas they did with the film. It was pretty different in certain ways. I thought the whole creature inside Jason's body, that was interesting. I didn't think it needed to make it seem like, oh, the creature was always in Jason controlling him, and it wasn't Jason himself, like the demon creature. They should have explained that better, and they should have made it like, oh, well, the creature like added some evil element to him, and but Jason's motives from the beginning were already different. They were his own, and then he became influenced later on. They should have explained it like that. The film made it seem like, oh, that creature was always in his body, so that was kind of stupid. I thought it was cool, though. I'm going to give Jason Goes to Hell 3 Beanie Babies. Sorry if you disagree. Wishmaster. Now, I'm only going to talk about Wishmaster 1, and I really didn't know what this was, so I just picked it up because I thought the cover looked interesting. It was a treat. It was weird. It was unintentionally funny. There was bad acting. So many bad acting in it. It feels like one of those TV movies that they aired on the Sci-Fi Channel back in the 90s and the 2000s. And it reminded me of like the villains from like the Power Rangers. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was pretty creepy what happens in the film. It was classic. It was like classic, campy, Sci-Fi Channel original movie, 90s kind of thing going on, Power Rangers-esque. So the nostalgia it gave me from that, to relive the piece of that era again, I really like it for it. But at the end of the day, it was a pretty good movie. I liked the mind element to the film, how it goes deep into the mind. I like the psychological nature of the movie. I give Wishmaster, I'm going to be generous. I'm going to give it 3 Beanie Babies, even though it kind of probably doesn't deserve it. Universal Soldier: The Return. I have not seen the third Universal Soldier movie, which brought back Dolph Lundgren yet, but I really like the first Universal Soldier, and I really like this sequel. I think it's underrated, and Michael Jai White's in it, and he's awesome. Goldberg, are you kidding? He's in it. He was so cool. I wish they gave him some dialogue. And Van Damme, of course. This is a classic, like 90s movie. It was definitely entertaining. Michael Jai White, this is one of his best movies. I thought he was so goddamn cool in this movie. Man, I loved his dialogue. He had this really badass dialogue, and he was like the villain of the film. It was stupid that Dolph Lundgren was not in the film. But I give Universal Soldier The Return. I give it three solid Beanie Babies. This is Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls. This is the second Ace Ventura film. It's crazier than the first film. I don't know. It's just Jim Carrey being Jim Carrey, and he's hit and miss with people, and I love Jim Carrey, so I thought this was really enjoyable. And back in the day, Ace Ventura was huge. He was like a big deal before Austin Powers became a big deal. And Ace Ventura, looking back, like he was one of the biggest movie comedy characters of all time. Up there with Frank Drebin from Police Squad, Austin Powers, Ace Ventura, The Nutty Professor, whatever. I give this 3 Beanie Babies. Vegas Vacation. Now, this is the 4th Vacation movie, and they made like a lot of them. I'm a huge Vacation Vacation fan of the films. I think this film does deliver ultimately. It's not quite as good as the earlier Vacation films, but it does the job well. I actually like the tenderness of the plot. It becomes really sweet at the end of the movie with the family and the storyline and everything. And the kids are getting older. The original actor that played Rusty in the first 2 Vacation movies, he left when they made Christmas Vacation, which was the 3rd Vacation movie. Then that same actor, now older, came back to play Rusty again for Vegas Vacation. The actor that plays Audrey is a different actor. Eddie is back, and his kids are growing up from Christmas Vacation and the original Vacation. I think this is a really good move. I love that they decided to do this. I love that they didn't give up on the Vacation movies. I love that they realized that there's so much more oil left in this tank. Man, do I love the Vacation movies. The Vacation movies are one of the greatest movie series of all time. I give Vegas Vacation 3.5 Beanie Babies. And last but not least, we have a childhood favorite from 90s kids everywhere. Of course, you all know this. Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. During the 90s and the early 2000s, there was like a lot of Scooby-Doo movies, and they released them on video. I think a lot of people would agree with me that the earliest ones, like the first 3, were way better than the later ones. Like, this is way better than, like, Cyber Chase and all that other stuff. And The Witch's Ghost was really good, too, because it had the Hex Girls in it. But Zombie Island 1 was great. And the soundtrack was really great. It was memorable. It got stuck in your head, like, weeks after you'd watched the film. The animation is a step above the typical Scooby-Doo animation. It's like, this is when Scooby-Doo got better. To me, like, I always thought Scooby-Doo was an overrated cartoon series, but what I realized is that certain Scooby-Doo shows and movies I do like, but then a bunch of others I hate. And this one I love, and this was always one of my favorites. And I love this movie. Like, the music, the tone, the jokes are even like adult jokes in here too. It feels like the ultimate Scooby-Doo movie experience. And if you look back on the history of Scooby-Doo, this actually is the first Scooby-Doo movie before they made the live action one. Before this movie, it was all the cartoons. So Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, I did not see the Return to Zombie Island. I heard people hated it. But the soundtrack for the original is amazing, and this is one of the greatest 90s cartoon classics of all time. I give Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, I give it 4 Beanie Babies. I gotta. Well, there's my video. 100 90s movies in one video. I hope you guys loved it. Let me know in the comment section below, of all the movies I reviewed in this video, which one out of all of them was your absolute favorite? Was it Space Jam, or was it Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island? Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching. Please leave a comment. I love you guys. Take care. I'll see you next time. Peace.